Athina Tzemprin and I'm a manager at Moonshot. Moonshot is a social enterprise working to end online harms, including violent extremism, applying evidence, ethics, and human rights. For too long, terrorism and violent extremism have been seen as a very masculine problem. However, women and youth have historically been key targets of violent extremist and terrorist organizations too. While participation of women in violent extremist movements that typically have a misogynistic agenda may seem contradictory, it is important to look into push and pull factors to understand the appeal that such movements may have to women. Push factors consist of individual, societal, and political factors that may render someone vulnerable to radicalization. These in many cases can be gender-specific, owing to the different experiences that gender may have in life, but can also be overlapping across genders due to other intersectional identities. Push factors may include personal victimization, discrimination, trauma, or other historical, political, economic, and personal grievances. Pull factors, on the other hand, are positive incentives that make membership into extremist and terrorist groups appealing. This can include a feeling of inclusion into an inner group, empowerment, friendship, or familiar ties, feeling of being part of a group that can bring about political or societal change and challenge the status quo. Terrorist organizations' online recruitment strategy is multifaceted and adapts its narratives and techniques in accordance to the audiences they try to reach. They tap on and exploit the often legitimate grievances and push factors that their targets experience. This is something that we see in terrorist groups' online propaganda materials. For example, in the case of groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, the discrimination that visibly Muslim women experience in Western societies is reproduced widely and exploited by the groups to polarize and exacerbate an us versus them narrative or an existential clash of civilizations type of narrative. The nature of gendered recruitment and radicalization narratives is also largely dependent on how violent extremist groups ascribe roles to women. As such, the role of women in violent extremist groups can vary. More often, female members are used to legitimize and normalize such groups through subtler framings that focus more on values, especially family values, and less on the use of violence. In the case of alt-right online narratives, this is something that we see in the discourse of female alt-right influencers whose content focuses a lot on the return to more traditional gender roles and opposition to modern-day feminism, supposedly imposed by political correctness and left-wing ideals. Similarly, ISIS propaganda has sought to challenge modern gender norms and further emphasize a rejection of Western feminism. For ISIS, women who join the organization are free to live Islamic lives without restriction of Western laws, and such narratives are an important factor of appeal. The group have specifically targeted to women, Muslim women living in the West, and have sold their message as one of empowerment. Perhaps most notably, ISIS has been skilled in communicating that their cause is not merely military, but is also about building the new Islamically sound world order. As such, women who do not necessarily join to fight, but they're attracted to the brand of ISIS. Violent extremist groups invest a lot in their branding and online propaganda materials. Groups across the ideological spectrum have been creating and disseminating propaganda materials, including magazines, videos, etc., with gendered content. For example, Al-Qaeda has a women-specific magazine titled Daughters of Islam. Similarly, when it comes to youth, terrorist and violent extremist groups adapt their strategies, deploying internet language such as memes and references to pop culture that initially may appear as edgy humor, but over time become overtly racist and violent. Terrorist groups navigate online spaces in a very advanced and professional manner, making use of the most emerging platforms and often using gaming platforms to approach young people before luring them into private chat rooms and encrypted platforms where youth can be exposed to more polarized and extreme views. For all the above reasons, it is important to understand gender and age-specific radicalization push and pull factors, as this can play a key role in explaining the differences in why women and youth engage with and disengage from violent extremism.